I am here today to talk about In the Afterlight by Alexandra Bracken. I'm not even gonna act like it's gonna be a fast video. It's gonna be a long video, so get a snack or get something because there's a lot to discuss. In general, I have given this series 5 out of 5 stars, I think, for all the books and all the novellas. It's a personal favorite of mine. This is going to be a spoiler-filled video, and as the nature, since it's the 3rd book of the series. So, if you do not know what The Darkest Minds is about, I will have a link down below in the About section that has the Goodreads link to the 1st book of the series so you can read it and be amazed. So this is the time where y'all are gonna be leaving. And I will see you guys then later after you've A, finished In the Afterlight, and then you can watch this video, or B, for my next video. So I'm telling you to leave in 3, 2, 1. So there's one thing that I want to discuss before I go into the rest of the book. I was very apprehensive with this book, and I was talking to Danny from Performing Bookfelf, and it was almost like it was post-Allegiant stress disorder. If you have not read Allegiant, then there's going to be a spoiler thing here. When that goes away, you can rejoin. There were some times where I thought it was heading in the way of Allegiant. In my notes I have the first line of the book, or like the quote that kind of describes the book. In our youth, our hearts were touched with fire. And in my head I was like, were, past tense, were, what does that mean? And then somewhere in the middle it says something along the lines of like, it didn't really matter what happened to me anymore. And I have that highlighted within caps and it's, don't pull a tris! I thought I was going to cry and have a heart attack. But it didn't, so that's a good thing. It's a good thing. So in the beginning of the book, we are left off with, after the 2nd book, the headquarters being bombed. We're kind of stuck in this limbo place of what do we do? And right off the bat, Ruby is coming back from trying to find a way out of LA. She runs into officers who have ulterior motives and wish to turn the kids in for profit, and immediately it's almost like we're back to square one. We thought we got rid of all the bad guys, but we're still infiltrated by them. So it's immediately starting off with an action-packed plot. In this book, Ruby also really learns how to use her powers for good instead of manipulating people, in the sense of, you know, she used it to get the memories of one of the guards, and so that way people could go and leave LA and go to the ranch headquarters. And also she used it to make the other League agents go away, but that kind of was a double-edged sword, so it didn't really work out that well, but she had good intentions. And we're also introduced more into the character of Cole. He was introduced to us in the last book, but Ruby was on the mission to go and find Liam and the USB key, and so now we finally kind of get to see Cole, and also Cole and Ruby's relationship as well as Cole and Liam's relationship. Ruby and Cole really had a serious bond in this book, and reasonably so, because they're both dealing with powers that are very scary to normal people. I liked that Ruby kind of finally had someone there who wasn't crazy, like Clancy, and who she could rely on. At the same time, I really wasn't feeling the whole Cole just kind of asserting himself, and we saw that kind of brother dynamic between Cole and Liam, and Cole just kind of asserting himself and being the kind of overprotective big brother, and Liam being like, no, that's not how we should do it, and them clashing heads. And it was very hard for, I think, me reading it sometimes, that Ruby always tended to take Cole's side, and I felt that sometimes she should have stuck up for Liam a little bit more. So I liked Cole as a person, I just don't think he made the most effective leader. So finally, when the League decides to move from headquarters to the ranch, we find Zoo along the way, and it was so exciting, and I was grinning like an idiot from ear to ear, and I was so excited to find Zoo again. It was just such a heartwarming part of the story that Zoo, Ruby, Chubbs, and Liam are all back together, and all they would need is Black Betty, which we'll get to later. One of the things that still confuses me about the whole Cole thing is, in the book, after Kate leaves and Vita comes back and says, you know, you weren't there, but she told me to tell you that playing with fire will only get you burned. Kind of referring to Cole, and it almost sounded like Kate was trying to make Cole the bad guy, but he never really was. I'm not still sure what Kate meant by that, and I wish that was kind of maybe clarified a little bit better. I absolutely loved and adored, and I got really emotional when Zoo finally started speaking. Like, I knew it had to happen sometime in this book, but I was not expecting it to happen when it did happen, and it was just so lovely, and everyone cheering her on, and Vita kind of became like the big sister like Kate had become to Vita. I really loved the Vita and Zoo scenes because they were really sweet, and whereas I think Ruby kind of took on almost a like maternity role with the Zoo, I felt like Vita took more of like a sister role. And I really loved seeing Zoo and Vita interact and seeing a softer side of Vita as well. Vita also grew to be one of my favorite characters. I remember reading the second book, Never Fade, and being so like, oh, I hate her, and then as the book go on, really loving her, and now I love her so much. I would love to see some type of like book or novella or something from Vita's point of view. I don't think that's actually gonna happen, but I think her inner voice and her inner monologue would be really funny and sarcastic and very entertaining. And then when we see V and Chubbs together walking out of the closet, and Chubbs is all flustered and Vita just comes and like drops his jacket on his head and just walks out like, see you later, and not really caring. I think everyone around the universe clapped when they got to that part of Vita and Chubbs together, because they're such an unlikely pair, but they work in a strange and weird way. And first of all, go Chubbs. Second of all, I'm just glad that Vita finally has people that she can kind of trust. I also think Chubbs really steps up in this book, and he puts on his big boy boxers. I love the fact that in this book he's not afraid to say what he thinks, and I mean, he's always kind of done that in the past, but now we really kind of get to see someone who's not afraid to take risks in what he's saying. In the first book is always, don't do this, don't do that, do you know what this could do? And throughout like the progression of the series, you finally see him being his same old self and being a little worrywart, but at the same time you see him kind of flower and bloom and learn to take risks. I kind of knew Cole's death was coming just from the writing. There had never really been any long goodbyes. Everyone just kind of left and did their thing. This was like the first time before Cole's death that kind of changed, and there was an emphasis on the goodbye. I had a feeling, or at least I really hoped, that it was going to be Cole, and I know that's probably really wrong, but I hoped that it was Cole, but at the same time I was still having these like Allegiant fears that I didn't know. So it was one of those things where I didn't get upset at Cole's death just because I was relieved, which I have conflicting feelings about myself. Like, I shouldn't really be feeling that, but I do. Cole's death was really gruesome and very not pleasant, but I'm glad that Alexandra Bracken didn't really shy away from that. She never really shies away from anything, in the fact of just kind of saying like, here's how it is. But I did like the detail that went into explaining Cole's death. We've kind of, besides Cole, only really seen one side of the Reds, and so when that ended up happening, it's one of those things where it's very sympathetic. So now time to talk about the three main characters, I would say. Ruby, Liam, and Clancy. Let's start with Ruby. I kind of had mixed feelings about Ruby in this book. Throughout the other two books, I feel like I probably would have made the same decisions as Ruby did, and I would have felt the same way. This book, about 70–80% of the time, I really did connect and understand what Ruby was doing. There were some times where I was very frustrated because I feel like sometimes characters just don't like to talk to each other, and a lot of the problems could be solved if people just talk to one another. I know that's a thing that happens in real life, just people just don't and expect other people to know what they're feeling. It's not how it works. Even in real life, you gotta talk your feelings out. People aren't psychic, you know. So when it came to like the Ruby Liam situation, I found myself a little frustrated because they were kind of on the outs for quite a while there, and it was just because they wouldn't communicate to each other, both Liam and Ruby. Ruby would go on these secret things with Cole, which I guess, like, besides his fire-using ability, she could have kind of talked to Liam about. And Liam then, because Ruby wasn't talking to him, he decided to go and do his own thing, and that just kind of made things worse. However, in all of this miscommunication, I do like the fact that Liam was thinking outside the box, and I liked that even though Cole and Liam really disagreed and they had two completely ideas, somehow, some way, they both worked out and they both ended up helping each other. So I like the fact that Liam was not afraid to not back down and stick up for what he believes in. I think that is a very important moral of this book, as well as life. I was getting a little frustrated just because I really wanted to see the two characters really together throughout this book and be a united front, and that didn't really happen. We had that in the first book, and then in the second book it was kind of like an angsty type of situation where she knew him and he didn't really know her because she erased his memories, and then they were kind of back together at the end-ish of the second book, and I was hoping that things would be resolved sooner and we could have more Ruby and Liam time. But they were kind of on the outs, but they still liked each other, and so it was kind of like together, not together, together, not together, together, not together, even though they were technically together. I just wish a little bit more of those conflicts could have been solved earlier on. Now for Clancy. If you have seen my Never Fade video, I really don't like Clancy. I'm just gonna keep it real. Clancy's a little piece of and I love my notes going back and reading them, because anytime Clancy's mentioned, now let's go through, shall we? Here are the words that I used to describe Clancy. That mother him. So that sums up my feelings on Clancy. He was getting into Ruby's mind without her knowing because she was asleep. She was asleep and she didn't know, and I remember a subtle hint of the sleepwalking earlier in the book, and I was like, ooh, I'll remember that. And then I didn't because time went on, and then in the notes I was like, oh crap, that's what it was. And it was, it just all made sense. So he was using her the whole time. He is the reason why Cole is dead, and it's just everything. I don't even have words besides what I already said. So with Clancy, we also had Lillian, which is Clancy's mother. I did not know if we should trust her, if we shouldn't. I mean, she's Clancy's like mother, for God's sakes. Like, the apple probably doesn't fall far from the tree. And I don't really agree with her idea of making kids go through this whole cure, but they have to go and get brain surgery every couple of years. Like, that kind of sucks. However, she did win brownie points when she decided to shoot Clancy, when she was like, I love you, bang bang, die. But I knew the whole Clancy situation, and he doesn't die just like that. I knew he was not dead. He has been a little rat living and surviving all this time. Why would he just die from that? I guess it would be poetic justice, but that's just not the way Clancy works. So in the end, Clancy's shot, and people are coming to rescue him, and Ruby, I guess, just decides to adapt, and then she decides to be captured. She goes and then starts making people believe that she's agreeing again with her powers, again, using it for good. Runs into her old girls again, and she runs into Sam, and she gives Sam back her memories, and I thought that was a really touching moment in that cabin at night when it started off with the girls are still there and they're telling their stories and they're talking about someone who escapes, and it was Ruby's turn to talk, and she talks about how the princess decides to come back to save her family and the ones that she loves because she couldn't get away without the rest of everyone else escaping too. And I was like, oh, like, I wonder if the girls kind of knew, and it kind of hinted that they hoped. but we would see about that. Everything at that point just kind of started coming full circle, and I love the end of books when everything just starts falling into place. So after that moment when Ruby is finally able to get into headquarters and she goes to put the malware virus, or the Trojan horse or whatever it was, puts the virus into the computers, and she realizes that the name of the virus was Jude, and Jude always strikes emotion in me. I cried. I think that was the first time I cried in the book, and it was just such a beautiful moment. Another, I think, beautiful moment in this book was, so virus kicks in, kids are escaping, and Ruby's tortured and whatever, but she comes back and, you know, Liam finds her and she wants to walk out, but her leg's been broken. To me, the beautiful part was the family members who were waiting there because of Liam's media. It shows that, not to get deep and philosophical, but I'm about to anyways, that no matter the wrongness or the hatred that some humans have in this world, that there are always people willing to love. And I thought that that was a very poignant moment. So Ruby then wakes up in the hospital and she sees her Graham for the first time. That was not so emotional, I think, as when her parents arrived, because they kind of didn't know what to do. They knew who she was, but they didn't have that emotional connection. And I liked how Ruby said that she was going to be doing this for the last time before she gave her parents her memories back. It wasn't until the end, when Ruby is in the hospital, that I cried for Cole, because there was articles in the newspaper. I think it wasn't until I was reading that and that all the action had kind of slowed down that I was able to process, you know, kind of what he meant to Ruby, and that Liam had lost a brother, and that this guy had died. And so it wasn't until then that I think I really had a few tears slip down, because I was sad that Cole wasn't there to see this. So finally, at this conference, in the last couple chapters of the book, you have Liam and Ruby and Chubbs and Vita and Zoo, who are all together. I think the thing that I loved the most about this book, though, was something that's not done very well, I think, in a lot of dystopian books. And I applaud Alexandra Bracken for doing this, because she tried having a solution afterwards. I feel like most dystopian books would end when, you know, the kids break out and they're reunited, and then everyone's united at the end, and oh yay, happy. But I don't think they go into the kind of aftermath of what kind of happens. And I loved that Alexandra Bracken put in the last couple chapters and really tried to explain the future for these kids, because that is a main issue. So at this conference, they're talking about, you know, kids under the age of 18, you know, their parents and their guardians get to decide who goes through this surgery that, you know, handicaps their abilities. If they're over 18, then they get to make the decision for themselves, but if they decide not to, then they're going to be living in these communities of kids that are the same. And Chubbs is like, whoa, 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 hold up, that's not gonna fly, because basically you're telling us that we're just going back into the same kind of situation that we were before. It's just masked under this, oh, happy little village thing. And that it's kind of implied that hopefully with Chubbs kind of there, everything will kind of turn out okay. One of the things that I was very, very disappointed in, though, is the ending with Clancy. Why? Why? I want him to wallow in his mind and be like, I had all of this power and now it's taken away from me, not by my choice. I want him to suffer. Is that so much to ask? But I guess Ruby took the high road. Again, something that I did not agree with Ruby about. And she decided to wipe his memories clean and give him a fresh start, and I was just like, no. I loved how the book ended, though, and Liam took Ruby, and it kind of gave a sense of normality in the fact of, you know, he's like, I want to spend as much time with you as possible. Soon enough, you're going to be going back up to the East Coast and I'm going to be going back down south, and we're not going to have the time together that we want, and so I want to be with you as often as possible. And then Liam and Ruby and Vita and Chubbs and Zoo find a car that is reminiscent of Black Betty, and then they get into it and they just take the high road, and oh, it was so beautiful, such a beautiful ending for a beautiful series. And then I cried at the last sentence of the book, because I don't know if anyone else picked up on it, but it says, and the open road rolled out in front of us. And I was just like, oh my god, that's like Jude's image, like what he pictured the end of all of this would look like when him and Nico had that conversation. And I thought it was such a beautiful way to perfectly sum everything up and to give the reader hope for the future. So that's all I'm going to talk about, but I know that there's so much more that I didn't even discuss. And so I guess that is it for today. I hope you liked it. Please comment down below with anything. I just want to talk about this book with people. I just do, I do. So comment down below if you like my videos. Please subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Goodreads, Tumblr, and Twitter. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. Relatively soon. Oh, Jesus.